Angels and Eggnog by Michael Bainbrook. The alarm went off at 6, and my first thought was, it's cold. After groaning, I crawled out of bed, dressed in my workout clothes, gathered my not-so-blonde hair into a ponytail, and hugged my shoulders as I trotted out to start the silver Buick LaCrosse sitting in my drive. While the engine warmed, I went back in and mixed a protein shake, which I drank on my way to the gym. Pulling into the parking lot, I scouted the place for Patty's light green Volkswagen Beetle, and when I saw it, breathed a sigh of relief at the thought of not having to work out alone. After my divorce from Scott, Patty and I decided we needed to get in shape, and we'd been going to the gym 3 or 4 times a week ever since. Surprisingly, Patty had been more diligent than me. She'd lost almost 60 pounds and was running 3 miles a day a couple times a week. I'd made progress too, although not as much as Patty. But we both liked the way working out made us feel, and as long as she was by my side, I could keep going. I stopped at my locker, then entered the workout area where the music was blaring. I walked over by the exercise bikes, and before I'd even lowered myself into a rowing machine, Patty was talking. "Hey, gorgeous," she grunted through heavy breathing. "Glad you could make it." "Well, if it gets any darker in the morning, I won't." Patty smiled, knowing what I was going through with the shorter days and colder temperatures. I wasn't really a morning person or a night owl, so getting up early while it was still dark was a double whammy for me. But it wasn't just that. It was the whole holiday thing. Christmas was just around the corner. Again, and I still had Thanksgiving leftovers in the fridge. And the work it took to make everyone happy this time of year, including Scott and his significant other, was already draining the season's spirit right out of me. Scott and I were living at opposite ends of the city. As much as I would have liked to just forget him, he was the father of my children and I had to consider his wishes. So besides the baking, the cleaning, the shopping, and the wrapping, the whole headache-triggering event, there was the loneliness when the family, minus me, was celebrating at his house. Christmas was supposed to be about families, not shards of families. December 21st is just around the corner, Patty huffed. The days will get longer after that. For now you just have to push through it. Anyone can do it in the spring when you want to look hot in a bikini, but winter, that's tough. "I'll never look hot in a bikini again in my life," I said as I stretched for the 2 rowing handles. Patty furrowed her brow, then reached for her water bottle. "So you doing anything with Barry tonight, or are you free for some girl stuff?" "Free. Saw him last night." I was starting to shorten my sentences. She sat up straight, her lungs greedily separating oxygen from the other gases. "You know what we should do? We should drive down to St. George this weekend and go to Brigham's Playhouse, you know, where we saw Jane Eyre. I hear they're doing Anne of Green Gables." "Maybe," I said flatly. "How is Barry anyway?" "Good, I guess." "Good, you guess? What does that mean?" I hesitated for a moment, then in a casual tone, one in which someone might announce that they're going outside to weed the garden, I said, "He asked me to marry him." Barry and I met about a year ago at a regional church softball tournament. Softball was another component of Patty and my Get Off Our Butts program. Barry and I talked a little between innings, and after getting my number from a friend, he called me and asked me out a couple days later. Not having had a date since, well, for a while, I accepted. We went to dinner. Actually, it was the Ogden Chamber of Commerce annual awards banquet. It turned out that the dinner was being held in Barry's honor, along with 5 other successful business entrepreneurs from the Weber County area. I was immediately impressed and encouraged. Since my divorce, I'd hardly met a man with a job, unless you counted the author who went door to door selling his books, which certainly didn't qualify as steady work. After that, Barry and I began dating on a regular basis. For a long time, I didn't know what to make of Barry. Quiet, with almost no sense of humor, Barry was shorter than I liked, pudgier too. But it wasn't that. I just wasn't head over heels for the guy, although I admit that hadn't done much for me lately. The good thing was that he was growing on me, slowly but surely, perhaps more slowly than anything, but that was okay. The last thing I needed was to run off half-cocked after some guy with a great head of hair. I was confident that, given time, I might even fall in love with him. Patty was sure of it. With the announcement of Barry's proposal, Patty produced a huge smile, along with an exaggerated thumbs up while her gut moved in and out quickly. Wow. Were you expecting it? Not at all, I said. What did you say? That I'd have to think about it. What did Barry say to that? I let go of the rowing machine, hung a towel around my neck, and patted my face with both ends. He said 10 months was already a lot of time to think about it. He's right, Patty confirmed. I bit back a stinging retort as I watched her, "When you really don't get it" look fill in the creases of her face. Only a happily married woman could call this a no-brainer. Patty was on her first marriage, and her husband Frank adored her. She would always be on her first marriage, and Frank would always adore her, and I was happy for them. But at the same time, I couldn't be rushed into something I didn't want, chasing Patty's brand of marital bliss. If there was one thing I knew, it was that Patty had no idea how much I wanted to avoid my third divorce. Yes, third. I hated to admit it, but before Scott, there had been Nick. I was 17, and he had a Harley Davidson. Enough said. 3 months later he disappeared, but not before cleaning out our bank account of $700, which I saved by working nights at the Top Stop. Patty closed her eyes and shook her head, refusing to hide her dismay. Then, as if on cue, it began. Patty, are you crazy? Me, maybe. Patty, you want to be alone for the rest of your life? Me, wasn't planning on it. Patty, what's wrong with Barry anyway? Me, nothing. Maybe that was the problem. Patty, and away she went. Patty was a good friend, so I pretended to listen carefully. And I effortlessly admitted there was nothing wrong with Barry, clean, loyal, and well-to-do. And people in town complimented me on my catch like I'd landed a record trout on opening day at Gooseberry. Maybe there was something wrong with me. Had I ever considered that? 2 marriages, 2 divorces. It was like admitting that the young and the restless made sense. How long are you going to make Barry wait? My mouth opened wide. What am I supposed to do? Put a stopwatch on our dating? If we're not madly in love by such and such a date, we break up? I didn't dare tell Patty, but that's exactly what I'd done. Barry was on the downside of 3 months, bless his heart, and he had no idea. Of course not, Patty said. I just hope you know what you're doing. He's considered quite a catch. Maybe, but I would rather be happy than dignified. What's that supposed to mean? You don't recognize it? Patty swung her head back and forth. It's from Jane Eyre. Patty looked at me with pity, like I didn't have anything better to do than commit famous romance books to memory. She noticed herself in the mirror and pushed up on her workout top, rearranging her cleavage. Did he give you a ring? He tried, I said. But I haven't accepted it yet. You made him take it home with him? Her bafflement was obvious. I put out my arms. What was I supposed to do? Keep it? Patty looked at me like I should soon feel a cool blast of shame once it all sank in. I didn't. Was it nice? She asked. I nodded with a hint of despair. I could actually see the diamond in this one. And I mean really see it. Patty sighed. I just don't think you're in a position to be so picky. That shut me up. I tried to remember, was Patty a friend? Then she changed the subject, but only slightly. Your 1-year anniversary is coming up soon. You doing anything special? Barry wants to go to Deer Valley. He has a condo there. Deer Valley? Patty cried dreamily. I would kill to spend a weekend at Deer Valley. See? He loves you. I don't want to go to Deer Valley. It's like an hour from where I live. Is it too much to ask to go somewhere new and different? Like where? California? Like Scotland or Nepal? Nepal? What's in Nepal? Patty asked. I don't know. That's why I need to go there. To see it. 30 minutes later, after adding some pull-downs and dumbbell lunges to our daily routine, we headed for the locker rooms. We showered, wrapped ourselves in a towel, and slipped away for a 10-minute steam. In the sauna, everything was white. Clouds of vapor mushroomed up around us. I let go a breath that emptied my lungs of everything from used-up air to stress. This was the best part of my day. Complete sanctuary. Now if I could just get Patty to be quiet. No such luck. Look, Gwen. I just want you to be happy, Patty said, wiping under her eyes. If Barry doesn't do it for you, then for Pete's sake, don't marry him. But you got to figure out what you want. You've been single for too long. And nice, rich, available guys who want old ladies like us don't come around all that often. Something in the steam might have helped me see her point better. Barry was a good man. Any woman would have been lucky to be with him. And 3 years should have been enough time to know what I wanted. The kids were gone. It was the perfect time to start a new life, and I knew in my heart of hearts that I wanted someone to start it with me. In many ways, Barry was as close to perfect as I could expect.
It was probably the jacket Dino thought as he walked to his living room window and looked out over the lake, a coffee cup in his hand. Yeah, people were intimidated by his kind of jacket, all leather, an airman jacket. He'd bought it while stationed in Germany and he'd had it ever since. Thick leather with some patches, handmade. It was high-quality stuff, hence, it was still in good shape after more than 20 years of dragging it around the world with him. Add in the old truck and the mysterious past, and he was a constant source of small-town chatter in the local diner and salons. Dino had moved to Snow Lake 3 years ago, shortly after ending a career with a Special Forces branch of the U.S. military. After years of being in difficult and often life-threatening situations, his life was now quiet and protected, sometimes too quiet, he would casually admit to himself. With his severance, he bought a place near the lake, a small cabin-style home, and built a workshop out back. He kept it clean, something that he'd learned in the army. Grass grew in the front and back of his house, and he actually liked mowing it. He had 2 pine trees in his yard that he'd named Chip and Joanne. Maybe best of all was the hot tub he'd installed out back. Occasionally though, he would stand back and take in his quiet surroundings and his small town life. And he wouldn't quite recognize himself. Who was this guy, walking his dog, mowing his lawn? Here's a good example. He baked, especially bread, and he'd picked up on a no-knead dough recipe with oats, couscous and pumpkin seeds that had earned him praise from the kids at a local boys' home. He'd even used the dough to make scones for breakfast, or late at night, any time, really. For the most part, people in town usually just left him alone. And that was the way he wanted it. He had a couple friends in the local search and rescue unit, and there was Matt at the boys' home. Matt was also on search and rescue. That's how Dino started volunteering at the boys' home in the first place. All in all, he liked his life here at this end of the world. Dino stood with a coffee cup in his hand, sipping. The lake looked like melted licorice and marveled at the beautiful view. Then the toilet flushed, pulling him back to the present. Hey, good looking. Dino glanced back, seeing Yvette in a towel, her hair wet, having just gotten out of the shower. Should we watch a movie tonight? Gotta work, Dino said, turning back to the lake. He knew that wasn't what she wanted to hear, but he couldn't do anything about it. It was his busy time of year. When will I see you again? Probably after Christmas. You can stay away from me for that long? She said, pouting playfully. She walked over, ran her hand across his back and over his shoulder. Hey. What? I think we should move in together. Leaving her, Dino turned and walked into the kitchen. He dumped what was left of his coffee in the sink, ran water in the cup, and set it on the counter. I don't think it's a good idea. Why not? 'Cause I need my space. You didn't need your space an hour ago, Yvette said, hurt. Exhaling deeply, he leaned against the counter and pushed his hands in his pockets. This wasn't the first time she'd sang this song. And when he thought about it, she was great, a little possessive, a little too much hairspray, but overall good to be around. He liked it when she was over at his place. He also liked it when she left. Dino, I want to be a part of your life, not just your Friday night. She was waiting for him to join her in serious talk. He didn't want to. Can we do this another time? Yvette stared at him for a moment with penetrating eyes. Then after spinning around, she marched upstairs to Dino's bedroom loft. When she came down again, she was dressed, her bag over her shoulder. Call me when you grow up, she thundered and swung the door behind her. I may never call you if I have to wait that long, he thought. He watched her stomp out to her car. A moment later, her tires were spinning. He shook his head and looked at the clock. Yesterday, a woman left a message on his answering machine. He knew the woman but hadn't spoken to her for years. She said she would call back around 8. She added that it was important and said she would appreciate it if he could be home to take her call. She'd practically ordered him to be waiting. Nothing new. He was used to taking orders. When the phone rang, he answered it in a softer voice than usual. Hello. There was a brief pause and then, Hey Dino. It's Kaylee. Her voice had hardly changed since the last time he'd heard it. It was calming, sweet, like when a woman wakes up in the middle of the night. Dino, are you there? I'm here, he said, reaching behind him for a stool. How have you been? Good, I guess. You? Fine. She kind of laughed. It's weird talking to you after all this time. He didn't ask why it's taken so long for her to call. He knew why. Yeah, it is. He paused. I heard you got married. Stupid. It's only been decades and she was gorgeous. Of course she got married. Yeah. Anyone I know? She said he wouldn't know him. He was from Tucson, a biopharmaceutical rep who traveled the hospital circuit. He was gone a lot but he made a good living and he treated her well. Sounds like everything worked out. I'm happy for you. She asked what he'd been doing since leaving the military and he tried to sum it up quickly for her, his move to Idaho, the place he'd found by the lake. He was just trying to stay out of trouble, he finally added. Normal stuff. That sounds like you, Kaylee said. There was a thick silence. Then he asked, So, what can I do for you? Yes, you're probably wondering why I'm calling. Kind of. After exhaling, Kaylee said she'd been wanting to talk to him for a long time. She debated whether to call him or just drive up so they could talk face to face. You see, she had something to tell him. She said the news would come as a shock to him, but that it was the truth. She hated dropping it on him like this, but there just didn't seem to be another way. Kaylee. Yeah? Would you just say it? Not long after you disappeared. I didn't disappear. I made a career change. Yeah, okay. Not long after that, something happened. What? She paused. I had a baby. Dino straightened. Wow. Yeah. A little girl. A girl, huh? Dino thought for a minute. How soon after I disappeared, I mean, whatever? About 8 months. Dino paused and did the math. What does that mean exactly? It means that you're a father, Dino. He felt his brow crinkle. Are you sure? I'm very sure. It was the last time you were home on leave. I was going to tell you on your next visit. But you never came back. But when you heard I was alive. Trust me, you were in no condition to hear it. I don't even know if I should be telling you now. Dino switched the phone to the other ear, stalling. He had to think about this. How old is she? 24. 24? Geez. Kaylee said she would understand if he was angry, but she hoped he would just think about things before getting upset. It might take some time to digest it all, and that would be okay, too. She wants to meet you, Kaylee said. She knows who I am. Yes. Geez, Kaylee. You don't think you should have asked me first? He swallowed hard. She wanted to know who her father was and I didn't keep it from her. Dino's eyes moved back and forth, looking for a place to land. His throat felt thick. He ran a hand over his face. When? We were thinking Christmas. That's in like 2 weeks. He shook his head. I can't do it. Kaylee wanted to know why. You hit me with all this out of the blue for 1. 2, I'm too busy, and 3, you just hit me with this all of a sudden. I just can't. Not right now anyway. Kaylee tried to speak but he talked over her. Would you just think about it? She begged. He exhaled hard into the phone and the sound came back to him as a crackle. She's a great kid, Kaylee said softly, and she really wants to meet you. After ending the call, Dino set the phone on its base and walked out onto the deck. He plopped hard into an Adirondack chair and reached to pet Chester. The moon was up now, a half moon, and he could see deer rooting around in the tall, brown grass near the lakeshore. He couldn't believe it. He had a daughter. He actually had a daughter. And Kaylee said she was great. She was already in her 20s, for crying out loud. And she wanted to meet him, her father. That was all well and good, but what he wanted to know was she like him?